with this. Okay. So the next question is, what is a mistake that you've made as a leader, and what did you learn from it?
Well, I think, and I stressed this a lot last semester. I mean, being an effective communicator in all areas is so critical. And try as you might to keep everybody informed about all the decisions, it's not always possible. And as transparent and public and open as you want to be, some decisions you make that you just can't easily justify in the minds of some people.
Right.
So, lapses in, communication, I guess, is, something that people, I think, experience all the time, and you just keep having to get better and better at it. I mean, I think of the reviews, even that I've seen of other supervisors, because in higher ed, right, the review of the dean, most of it is public, and the review of the provost, most of it is public. And everybody gets dinged on communication, no matter how hard you think you're trying. So you just try to be as open as you can. So in that sense, talking out loud, there's when people make decisions, I didn't know this, but I was told this in the end. Sometimes people will go talk to each person separately and then try to compile and synthesize what you've heard, or it's always a group process where everybody hears what everybody says.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes people think that you might not be on the up and up if the conversations have been one-on-one. I can't believe they said that. That's not what I said. Blah-de-blah. It's he said, she said.
Yeah.
So these, it all turns on, again, try to be as effective a communicator in conveying the reasons why you make the decisions you make, as well as, being honest in summarizing the feedback so that it's effective and is representative and accurate. So that's tough. That's really tough to do.
Right. Especially if you have more than one person trying to give feedback, and
especially if people wanted your job.
Interesting. Yes, I imagine. Yeah, because that's always going to be biased toward you, no matter what.
Yeah. I mean, you're already below water.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's not really something I've heard come up, but that's something you kind of just is the case. And as much as people will say, "Oh no, I'm over it" or whatever, there's always something down. It's like,
well, some people are really better at that than others.
Yeah.
And so, for example, one of the toughest, and this is probably not even a question, but one of the toughest parts of the job, and maybe that goes along with the first question, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
On hindsight, I guess I was totally unprepared for this. I mean, one of the most important things we do is recruit and hire faculty and staff. And so when you interview a number of people, all of who have made the short list, all of them clearly can do the job. You can only give the job to one person.
Right.
And so one of the hardest things was calling the other two people and saying, you didn't get the job.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Do you? Because I remember we did an assignment in Dr. Portwood's class last semester. It was a hiring assignment. We had to go through and create like criteria and a whole kind of set of how we'd go about, recruiting, hiring, and then how you would select. Because obviously, I imagine, how would you select if you had 2 or 3 candidates that were essentially all the same, obviously same credentials, kind of background?
It's tough.
Yeah, I imagine
It's tough.
like, that kind of goes along the lines of making that phone call, and then the other end of somebody who's in that position who needs to be kind of no longer in that position.
Yeah. Yeah. Over the years, over those 8 to 10 years, because I also had this big grant where I was hiring a lot of staff.
Mm-hmm.
Over the 8 to 10 years, I probably hired between students, part-time faculty, and full-time faculty, and staff. I've never counted it, but I bet it was close to 100 people. Some of those were short-term positions. Some of them were, long-term positions. And over those years, I fired one person. That was pretty hard. It wasn't my idea.
Right.
That was pretty rotten. Had a lot of people quit.
Yeah. But that's not on you, though, because you don't have to be the one telling them.
And it was mostly the people that I was happy to see quit. Although we lost also some really good people.
Sure.
But for lots of different reasons.
Right.
Spouses. People move.
Yeah.
But telling people they didn't get the job, that was always pretty tough.
Yeah. Yeah, that's never want to be the kind of bearer of bad news.
And I always tried to call people.
Yeah.
Not just send it in.
Yeah, that kind of that's a level of respect that I think a lot more people should kind of exhibit. And
I waited until Friday at 5 and called.
Yeah. You ever sit there on the phone and just think, don't pick up, I'd rather get the answering machine?
Well, not really.
Oh.
And see, the trade-off there is historically, you get a phone call and it's good news.
Sure.
Historically,
Yeah.
you get the call because you're going to get the offer. And then so to call and say, well, you're not getting the offer.
Yeah.
That was kind of hard. I didn't know how to do that.
Right. So that's kind of like a learning experience.
Oh, yeah. I mean, how many different ways can you say we all liked you?
But exactly, it's always that first sentence that in your head. There's always a
it's like the subject of an email.
Yeah, exactly.
You know it's coming.
Yeah. Exactly. All right. So the next question I have for you is, what do you feel are the most important leadership traits? And are there any traits that you have that you'd like to improve on?
Everything, of course. I mean, I think people have to be, very consistent and fair and honest. I think those are very important. I think people need to have, this is not really, people don't really talk about it too much, but I think, mentoring is very important. Being the good communicator. And then in terms of, managing or running or operating or moving an organization forward, people have to have, vision and need to know how to build consensus. And that goes back to this idea of being able to listen to everybody's point of view. And I got okay marks from my peers for most of those. The one that was toughest, and I've been to plenty of workshops, and I apparently have never learned a thing about it, is managing conflict. And so people need to be able to know how to manage conflict, not only between yourself and other people, but often between other people.
Right.
You know,
Play that kind of middleman role.
Yeah. So I was never too good at that.
Right. Especially, I imagine that's a tough thing if you're trying to be sensitive to both parties and.
Yeah, I mean, I did the role play and read the books. And, I just couldn't figure it out. Mostly because, to me, I was fortunate. There wasn't what I thought was a lot of real conflict. You know, like, to me, it was always like kids fighting. You know, get over it. But apparently, for some, it was like I missed some opportunities.
Right, deeper issue kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So when I kind of hear consistency, fairness, and honest, that kind of plays to me. That sounds just like an overlying integrity kind of thing.
Oh,
having that.
Yeah, integrity is a good word. I mean, you got to have integrity. I mean, people need to know what you're going to say tomorrow is what you said yesterday.
Right, and that goes on the line of the consistency. I think is a very big factor that I see even in my work. Is just one day is this, the next day is something different.
I mean, you can't. I mean, there are a lot of twists and turns, but the destination doesn't change.
Right.
And so, and you got to be adaptable, flexible, whatever the word is now.
I see.
Environment change.
Yes, you are.
I think you also need to know, and this is the wrong word, but I think you need to know the competition, so to speak. So, in most places now, most industries, certainly true in higher education, right, resources are increasingly limited. I mean, everybody says that every year, but the data show that the support from the state legislatures across the country is way down, for higher ed. So we know there's less money. And so how do you align purposefully your group's vision with a larger group, organizational structure, so that you're in the queue for support?
Right.
is tricky. So I think it goes more to the vision thing, but being in sync with the people you work for, I think is important.
Right. Right. So kind of know that upper level of it and be able to kind of.
Yeah. You need to be able to be. Your efforts need to be coordinated with those of your own supervisor. How's that for BS? I mean, but it's true.
Absolutely.
And that's frankly one of the reasons why our department has always been very successful. We've always included and have given way more than lip service to the university's larger vision.
Right.
You do the things you want. Grow the strengths that are going to distinguish your department, but they can't be independent of where the university wants to go.
Yeah, because then you're just going to.
Yeah, can't be an island.
Right, exactly. Because then you're going to be stuck out there without resources and all that kind of.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. So the next question I've got is, what are 3 or 4 actions that you believe are essential to helping others be successful?
Well, again, I think this whole process of mentoring, I think, is very critical, and that comes increasingly now in different forms, right? So we do have junior faculty who need a different kind of support than mid-career faculty, than senior faculty. So mentoring in and of itself is good, but it's got to be tailored, right, to the needs and rank and ambitions of the person you're working with. So I guess you also need to be, in that context, right, sensitive to what the goals and priorities are of the person you're working with. Right, so you kind of have to understand what they hope to accomplish and develop as a person in order to kind of tailor the support that they need. And then what? Tell me the question again.
It was about what 3 or 4 actions you believe to be essential to helping others succeed,
so
be successful.
mentoring, and I think I think you have to be strategic in distributing the tangible assets that will help make people successful. And again, my knowledge base is in the industry of higher ed. So there's this classic tension that I learned, that I figured out. I think it exists. I had to deal with it, which is as departments grow, right, you add new programs, right, which means you have to add new people, more faculty, more staff. And so there's this tension. Do you build people around programs, or do you build programs around people? Right? Do you help do you let people do whatever they can do because they're going to be successful at what they do, or do you strategically manage people's strengths around a shared vision or agenda? And so my preference, the way I kind of figured it out, is people come and go. So if you want to build something, you can't depend on the people that are there if you want to sustain it. So if you think you want to have a program or a vision, in order to sustain that, you have to build people around that vision. You can't change every couple, 3 years when people leave. So managing that activity, I think, is very, very important.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. It's interesting because that kind of concept of, do what you're good at or do...
Well, it's making sure that what they're good at makes a contribution.
Right. Interesting. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And that they feel that they're doing what they want and making a contribution.
Right. Because nobody wants to sit there and just,
Yeah. And it's a lot. I think a lot of things are a third, a third, a third.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a third me, a third us, a third them, something like I don't know.
Right.
But making people feel that the fit is worthwhile and satisfying for multiple purposes. Right? That's kind of tough to do. Are you doing what you want? Yeah. Do you feel like you're helping? Yeah. Do you feel like that's worthwhile?
Right.
And you hope they say yeah.
Yeah. You got some issues on that if they don't.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, but again, we can do that pretty successfully in higher ed, given the level of autonomy that is associated with the life of a faculty person. Probably couldn't do that in a lot of other kinds of organizations.
Sure.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, as a leader, how do you manage work-life balance? And what's that?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, I thought you said, oh. And so what factors contribute to your balance/imbalance?
Well, fortunately, this has become a big issue. The topic has become a big issue. 20 years ago, it wasn't such a big issue. And in all industries, right, worker burnout, big problem. Affects morale, affects turnover, affects productivity, right? It's a bad thing. And the thing, I mean, you wouldn't know this, but it's true. The thing about higher ed, it ain't no 9-to-5 job. And you can let it consume you. I mean, I know the CEOs, you hear about the habits of the CEOs of these Fortune 500 companies, doing 120-hour weeks and all that crazy thing. Not uncommon for people to work 70-hour weeks as a sort of typical kind of workload. And there's just and you can do the 80 and 100 and 120 if you let it just eat you up.
Yeah.
So you do need to sort of realize that and protect some of your own time. So, in best of all worlds, you have an accommodating partner.
Right.
who sort of gets it.
It's a team effort, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And I don't know if you know this book, but, I'm not a real self-help kind of guy, but this pretty successful businessman, I think he was a businessman, his name was Steve Covey. He wrote this book called The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. He's dead now. But, this thing was a New York Times bestseller list for I don't know how long. Millions, probably, of copies sold. And most of those 7 habits, I've read it, tried to read it a couple times, but, one of his habits is what he calls sharpen the saw, where you need to have some protected time to invest in yourself, spend the time with the exercise program or the hobbies or the people, right, that you value.
Right. Kind of have your you time.
Right. Yeah. And then if you are in a relationship, family, whatever, there's got to be quality us time too.
Right.
But yeah, you got to find a little you time whenever you can. And you can't not have a life outside work. There's a great quote. I don't know who said it first, but I heard it from a talk by a former U.S. Senator from Massachusetts who was pretty liberal. This was 30 years ago. Gave a talk when I was at a different university. And I don't think he invented the phrase. You could probably Google it. But he said, no one wants on their tombstone, I wish I had spent more time at the office.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's important to keep in mind.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think are a couple reasons, or, what can lead somebody to be kind of consumed in that, 80, 100, 120-hour work week?
Well, again, it depends on kind of your rank, right? There's as a new faculty, there's the stress of getting tenure, of, being successful early in your career in order to be established as a long-standing, secure colleague, right? And then mid-career, right? You're sort of doing the bump and grind of grant getting and funding and publishing, and being on committees, and then as administrator, right? It's just more and more crap. Students don't hesitate. 10 years ago, I would never have gotten emails from students.
Mm.
Now we all do, and it's mostly okay, But I think what has happened is technology, which was supposed to have opened up more leisure, I think has actually done the reverse. Right? People have short attention spans. People have zero delay of gratification. And so I think those pressures contribute to people wanting to appear responsive, all these kinds of things.
Right, because I imagine there's a lot of pressure involved in that, especially, I imagine some could feel obligated. If they have access, obviously you have access to your work email 24/7. To have that access and having that, feeling the need of something comes in, I need to get it done, I need to respond right away because they can.
Yeah, and that's not so much the case as a faculty person, but it's certainly the case as an administrator.
Sure.
There were many, many days. You got your to-do list, but there were many, many days you just don't get to it because it's like, I need this, help me, here's a fire, what do I do?
Yeah, exactly.
And then it's like 6 o'clock.
Yeah, well, yeah. So then I guess...
But that's part of but I always felt that it was part of your job description.
Sure, is dealing with prioritizing the right here in front of you.
Yeah, so prioritizing is a good word too. That's probably a part of one of those good answers. And you do have to be ready to make, sacrifices is a weak word, but you do have to think that if you put your own needs is not the right word either, but if you put your own agenda, that's the right word, if you put your own agenda on hold in order to serve, which is what administrative leadership positions ultimately involves. If you really want to serve others, then you got to be ready to accept that.
Now put yourself second type of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. And that can obviously consume you on so many different levels.
Yeah, because you don't want to get too behind with your own stuff.
Yeah. And that's what, the same thing with, Miss Beat saying she said the exact same thing. You spend all, your 9 to 5 dealing with issues, and then by the time you get to your own work, you're not leaving until 7, 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah. Yep.
So this
and again, in higher ed, there's just no end, right? You can be writing articles 24/7. It's like, when do you stop?
Yeah. Right.
You got to learn how to protect your own time.
Right.
It's tough because the university's not going to say, "Oh, it's time to go home now."
Sure. Exactly. All right, so this next one is a kind of a good one. So, well, depends maybe. So, how do you keep the morale of your team, group, and employees up during stressful situations?
Oh, yeah, that's tough. Yeah. Well, there aren't too many. Well, what you have to do, and what we don't do enough of, is you have to celebrate the successes. People do that different kinds of ways, but you got to celebrate all the upticks, no matter how small, especially when things aren't going great. And you have to be able to give credit where credit is due. I think the best pictures of teams show the person who's helping lead the group, kind of in the back.
Right.
So and you gotta keep seeing the glass half full.
Just kind of stay
kinda
positive.
And when you look at the stock market, it goes up and down, up and down, up and down. mostly going up.
Right.
I mean, you got to take a long-term view of things.
It's a big picture idea kind of thing.
Well, actually, long-term, not only the big picture, you know, everybody's in the same boat. That doesn't help people.
Right.
But, you know, you got to, you know, there's some element, patience is not the right word, but persistence is a virtue. Yeah. I should put that on my desk, right? Yeah. And so, you know, find that soft spot between I forget the P words that I often use sometimes. You know, you can't be a pest all the time. 'Cause it turns people off. But you have to, you know, small victories, man, is what sometimes counts.
Enjoy the little things, right?
Because that's what happens with our academic careers, you know. I mean, you get told no a lot. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even in the good times.
Yeah. So when you finally get that yes, go with it.
Yeah.
All right. So the next few are actually going to be a few good ones that I think are on here. Well, they're all good,
Sure.
but just, you know, a little more, hit a little harder maybe. So, as a leader, what will you always fight for?
Well, you know, it's going to depend, right, on what the responsibilities are of your position. Again, thinking in terms of being chair, I mean, I guess a lot of my goal was to, you know, sort of be able to demonstrate that there was a return on people's investments, right? That either as individuals or as a group, the effort, the ideas, the plans were being perceived as innovative, progressive, right? So, you know, that's, I think, valuable in terms of faculty and staff. And then, of course, our job is to, you know, help develop the next 1 or 2 or 3 generations of leaders. And so, you know, making sure that, again, given the field I'm in, right, making sure that students have the right kinds of experiences that we think lead to a quality education that prepares people for positions in the future, many of which we don't even know what they are yet.
Mm-hmm.
So important.
Now, this is kind of an off question
Yeah.
that I've just kind of coming up with
Sure.
now. But do you feel that it's almost your responsibility to have or kind of give somebody the tools for to be able to fill your position?
Oh, that's pretty interesting. You know, you know, people talk a lot about being, I've read a little bit that a lot of people are interested in making sure that there's longevity or that, you know, we're going to adequately be able to replace ourselves with the right kind of person or the talented person. You know, I hadn't thought of that much. I mean, obviously, we do want people who get the changes that we're living through, sort of embrace those and really think that they're important in terms of demographics, in terms of history of experiences students bring to the table. And I don't think we have done a very good job generally in higher ed preparing junior faculty for their careers.
Mm.
So generally, yes. But me in particular, no, probably not.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of out of the key decision-making choice points
Right.
these days. You know, people do ask for my 2 cents. Easy to give. And maybe in this light, and thought of it, and it's not like it's a feather in my cap, but, you know, different people now are driving the bus. And I don't mind sitting.
And what's that?
I don't mind sitting on the bus.
Right. So kind of like.
So the people in the driver's seats, I'm pretty happy with.
Gotcha.
I hired them all.
Right. So kind of to a certain extent, in a sense of that, if you're the one calling the shots, then yes. If you don't always have 100% of the influence, then not so much.
Didn't get what you're asking.
No, it was just more kind of a summary. We'll forget about it.
I mean, I helped build the bus. Drove it for a while. I like maintaining the bus now.
Gotcha. Okay. You kind of passed that torch on type thing.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. So the next one: what legacy do you wish to leave?
Bah. Oh, I don't know.
Had to know that was coming at some point, right?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, technically. Oh, I have no clue. I mean, you know, the things that keep me going now. It's maybe hard for you to appreciate, but you know, we interact with hundreds and hundreds of students year after year after year, and every year I get 1 or 2 or 3 emails from someone who worked with me at some level, student, 5, 10, 20 years ago, and they say, "Oh, you made such a difference." And so, you know, knowing that few folks think I helped is good enough.
Right. No, I understand that completely. And I have the same kind of, obviously, much smaller scale because I'm a personal trainer. So some days, you know, I'll get a text saying, "Oh, hey, like you really helped me out a lot. That was great." And it's the little things. It feel good.
So the fact that a few folks think, you know, I helped with their career development as a person.
Mm.
You know, I think those are probably what's going to be most important.
Right. Absolutely.
I mean, and you know, this is way off, but you know, since the department was my idea, I don't think it's going anywhere. So, you know, I'll get some, you know, goofy things for your years of service, and it doesn't mean much. Because I've been here a long time. So, when there isn't much hope of a real legacy. When I was here for my 25th anniversary a couple years ago, you know, the provost gives you this little gift, and it was in this teal Tiffany-like box. I thought it was pretty cool. So I took it home, decided to open it with my wife, and what I get, it's a plexiglass photograph holder with this little note that said, "Thanks."
For your 25th anniversary? Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, do you have a nice picture in it at least?
It's just made in China. No. There's no picture. Here's my 25.
Oh, that's I gotcha.
Piece of plexiglass. Oh yeah, the miner.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Are you kidding me?
Huh.
Yeah, but still, you know.
So thought that
I have
counts, right?
longevity.
Sure.
I mean, I guess that's probably part of my legacy as well, is the longevity. I mean,
Sure.
You know, every year when people do get, we get our name in the opening ceremony for the academic year. Big deal. Who have reached 25 years. And there's only 10 or 12, every year who hit that 25-year mark. So longevity is a legacy.
Yeah. Especially nowadays, it seems like, especially the kind of entry-level, mid-level type positions, the turnover rate is huge in a lot of these kind of...
Well, a lot of the thought leaders, so to speak, who put out these reports say that people just won't have 7 jobs in their lifetime, but maybe 7 careers.
Yeah.
And that's another good thing about higher ed is, although people do move from institution to institution, I was never too interested in doing that. Not really. I mean, one of the good things is I've had a lot of different kinds of jobs on campus, so I haven't had to move to other universities to do the variety of things I've been able to do. I mean, so in that sense, UNC Charlotte has been very sort of good to me because as we have grown, there's always been opportunities to participate in something different.
Yeah.
And we're still not stagnant. So there has just been a lot of ways to make pretty reasonably important contributions to the growth of the university. And I think that comes with the longevity. I mean, I just can't imagine businesses surviving, in other industries with the level of turnover that you see in some corporations.
Right.
I mean, how do you get a sense of community?
Yeah, without you kind of having a core team within that.
You're right, and in terms of, community is a good word in terms of getting through the bad times. I mean, you have to have a sense of community.
Right.
People have to feel like they're in it together.
Yeah, and you're part of something bigger than just, And that kind of ties into the last question I've got for you, which, what has been your greatest personal achievement as a leader?
Well, I mean, I think there's a part 1, part 2. I mean, I think sort of technically, being an important part of the founding of this department, public health, the programs that we've put in place, as a tribute to the team that was assembled across time, made it happen. To be a part of that was pretty important. I don't think, if I think in the 20-something years I've been here, how many new departments actually got started on this campus? It's a handful. It's a handful. And we're one of them. So I think that's kind of reasonable. The other thing, too, one of the things I value most about the jobs and the kind of careers that we have in higher education is the long-lasting relationships that you build with like-minded colleagues, just not around the country, but even around the world. And so being a part, so I mean, it's not like an accomplishment or whatever, but being a part of a community of scholars where you have had just long-standing relationships with peers, and to have been a part of that community, I think, is an important sort of contribution. I mean, I've been fortunate. I mean, I know people all over the world. So, when my daughter did her study abroad several years ago now, over in Paris, I had a colleague look after her.
Nice.
Yeah, and so in that regard, like in a more sentimental kind of way, it's kind of consistent with this feeling of being part, of a larger community. I guess that's what I was trying to say. Put it that way. Right, you're part of this larger community of like-minded academic people. And to have made some kind of contribution to that community along the way because of your participation in professional organizations and in the research enterprise, right? Having made that contribution to that community, I think, is pretty cool. And then so things like this happen. So the guy I got my PhD with a long time ago, I knew him for almost 40 years. And even when he retired, we communicated regularly. I'd go down to Florida and visit him. And then about 4 or 5 years ago when he got sick, I got the phone call one day. He said, Andrew, I need you to do me a favor. I said, well, of course, what if I can? He said, can you write my obituary? It was kind of spooky.
Right, I remember you telling the story.
And then he died a couple years later. But, those long-lasting relationships, and to sort of be a part of that mix. And so when I shared with everybody that I could think of who would want to know that, Harry died, there's a clear sense of community, and that he had impacted students and colleagues, so, you hope that happens, I guess.
Right. Interesting. So that is all the